The world was quiet, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl, the kind that made you feel like the air itself was holding its breath. Elena stood in her kitchen, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the stillness. She glanced at the clock, 7:32 a.m. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow over the small, cluttered room. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of cinnamon from the cookies she'd baked the night before. Today was a special day, her daughter Mia's 8th birthday. Elena smiled as she stirred a spoonful of sugar into her coffee. Mia was still asleep, her tiny frame curled up under the blankets in the next room. Elena could hear the soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing, a comforting reminder of the life she'd built against all odds. Being a single mother wasn't easy, especially when you were also an environmental scientist trying to make a name for yourself in a field dominated by men. But Elena had always been a fighter. She'd fought for her education, fought for her career, and now she fought every day to give Mia the childhood she deserved. The town they lived in was small but vibrant, a place where everyone knew everyone else. It was the kind of town where kids rode their bikes down tree-lined streets, where neighbors waved to each other from their porches, and where the local diner served the best apple pie you'd ever tasted. Elena loved it here. It was safe, it was home, and it was the perfect place to raise Mia, but lately, something had felt off. The news was filled with reports of strange seismic activity, unusual weather patterns, and bizarre animal behavior. Just last week, a flock of birds had crashed into the town's water tower, their tiny bodies falling from the sky like rain. Elena had tried to brush it off, chalking it up to coincidence, but the unease lingered, a quiet whisper in the back of her mind. That night, as she lay in bed, Elena dreamed of the ocean. She stood on the shore, the waves lapping at her feet, the salt air filling her lungs. But something was wrong. The water was too still, too dark, as if it were holding its breath. And then she saw it, a shadowy figure emerging from the depths, its eyes glowing like molten gold. It was massive, its body a grotesque blend of ancient reptilian features and futuristic, biomechanical elements. It opened its mouth, and a deafening roar echoed through the air, shaking the ground beneath her feet. Elena woke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m. The house was silent, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves outside her window. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. It was just a dream, she told herself. Just a dream, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The morning of Mia's birthday started like any other. Elena woke up early, made breakfast, and helped Mia get ready for school. The little girl was practically bouncing with excitement, her eyes sparkling with joy as she talked about the party they'd planned for that afternoon. Elena couldn't help but smile as she watched her daughter, her heart swelling with love. But as they walked to school, Elena noticed something strange. The birds were silent. No chirping, no singing, just an eerie stillness that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the trees, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Just the same old streets, the same old houses, the same old town. When they reached the school, Elena knelt down to give Mia a hug. "Have a great day, sweetheart," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I'll see you this afternoon, okay?" Mia nodded, her smile lighting up her face. "Okay, Mommy. Love you." "Love you too," Elena replied, watching as her daughter ran off to join her friends. She stood there for a moment, a strange sense of foreboding settling over her. She shook it off, telling herself she was just being paranoid. But as she turned to leave, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. At first, it was just a slight vibration, barely noticeable. But within seconds, it grew stronger, the shaking so violent that Elena had to grab onto a nearby lamppost to keep from falling. The air was filled with the sound of cracking concrete and shattering glass as buildings began to crumble around her. People screamed, their voices drowned out by the deafening roar of the earthquake. Elena's heart raced as she realized what was happening. "Mia," she screamed, her voice barely audible over the chaos. She stumbled toward the school, her legs trembling as the ground continued to shake. The building was partially collapsed, its walls cracked and crumbling. Elena's stomach churned as she thought of her daughter trapped inside. She pushed her way through the debris, her hands bleeding as she clawed at the rubble. "Mia," she cried again, her voice breaking. And then she heard it, a faint, muffled sound coming from beneath a pile of broken concrete. Elena's heart leaped as she recognized her daughter's voice. "Mommy. I'm here." Elena's hands moved faster, her fingers raw and bleeding as she dug through the rubble. Finally, she saw Mia's face, pale and tear-streaked but alive. She pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tightly as the ground continued to shake around them, but their relief was short-lived. As the dust began to settle, a new sound filled the air, a deep, guttural roar that sent shivers down Elena's spine. She turned, her eyes widening in horror as she saw it, a massive, otherworldly creature emerging from the ground, its glowing eyes scanning the area with an intelligence that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. The creature was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Its body was a grotesque blend of ancient reptilian features and futuristic, biomechanical elements, its scales glinting in the sunlight like polished metal. It stood on two powerful legs, its long tail swishing behind it as it moved. Its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth, and its claws were the size of swords. Elena's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't just an animal, it was something else, something far more dangerous. And it was heading straight for them. "Run!" Elena screamed, grabbing Mia's hand and pulling her toward the nearest building. They barely made it inside before the creature's massive claws slammed into the ground where they'd been standing just moments before. Elena's heart pounded as she pressed herself against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around Mia. The creature let out another roar, its glowing eyes scanning the area as it searched for its prey. Elena held her breath, her mind racing as she tried to figure out what to do. They couldn't stay here, the building was crumbling around them, and it was only a matter of time before the creature found them. But where could they go? The town was in ruins, and the creature was everywhere. Elena's maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. She had to protect Mia, no matter what. But as she looked into her daughter's terrified eyes, she realized just how powerless she was. The creature was too big, too strong, too intelligent. How could she possibly fight smoothly? The hours that followed were a blur of chaos and fear. Elena and Mia managed to escape the crumbling building, but the town was in ruins. The streets were littered with debris, the air thick with dust and smoke. Survivors stumbled through the wreckage, their faces pale and drawn as they searched for loved ones. Elena led Mia to a nearby park, where a makeshift shelter had been set up. The place was packed with people, their voices a cacophony of fear and desperation. Elena's heart ached as she looked around, her mind racing with questions. What was that creature? Where had it come from? And why was it here? As the hours passed, more survivors arrived, their stories adding to the growing sense of dread. The creature had attacked the town's power plant, cutting off electricity and communication. It had destroyed the water tower, leaving the town without clean water. And it had targeted the hospital, killing dozens of people in the process. Elena's scientific mind kicked into gear as she tried to make sense of the situation. The creature's attacks weren't random, they were strategic, targeting key infrastructure and resources. It was almost as if it was trying to weaken the town, to make it easier to hunt its prey. But why? What was its goal? And how could they possibly stop it? As the sun began to set, a group of military vehicles rolled into town, their presence a small glimmer of hope in the midst of the chaos. The soldiers quickly set up a perimeter around the shelter, their weapons at the ready. Elena watched as a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out of one of the vehicles, his face stern and unyielding. He introduced himself as Colonel Marcus Drake, the leader of the military unit tasked with dealing with the creature. Drake's presence was both reassuring and intimidating. He was a man of few words, his every movement exuding authority and confidence. But there was something about him that made Elena uneasy, a coldness in his eyes, a ruthlessness in his demeanor. She could tell that he saw the creature as nothing more than a threat to be eliminated, a problem to be solved. Elena approached him, her voice trembling as she tried to explain her theory about the creature's intelligence. "It's not just an animal," she said. "It's 2S.